Hi, welcome to the channel. I'm Lauro Miller and make videos about programming. Today we'll cover symbols, the last of the primitive types. We'll go through some of their unique characteristics and how we can convert from symbols to other primitive values. Let's switch Notion and let's get started. Well, maybe you've never heard of symbols and you've never used symbols, and that's okay because symbols are a somewhat more obscure primitive type in JavaScript. Of course, it's important to be familiar with it, but don't expect to use them every time. And the interesting thing of symbols is that they behave they have a few characteristics of primitive or primitive values. So they have some primitive-like behavior, but they also have some object-like behavior. So that's what we're going to explore. We'll start with what makes it a primitive-like behavior or what makes it a primitive. And we'll also talk about what makes this look like an object when working with comparison and assignment. And then we'll finish by discussing what happens when we try to convert symbols to other primitive values. New file here, let's call this behavior, right? So let's start by creating a numeric symbol, and the way we create a symbol is to use the symbol factory. We don't need to pass anything here as an argument, but we can pass a description, right? We can also pass, let's say, a string here or a number, and we can say also const string symbol, something like this, and we're going to call this symbol A, for example, right? This description here is more useful for logging purposes. Behind the scenes, it doesn't really impact the behavior of this symbol. It doesn't mean that because the description is different here, these two symbols are going to be different. This happens because symbols are inherently different than other symbols. Even if I pass something like this and something like this, these two symbols are going to be different. And that's what makes it behave like an object when we are comparing symbols, right? But let's go back a little bit here. We'll discuss this object-like behavior in a bit. So if I were to, let's say, console log the type of, not log, but log the type of my numeric symbol, I will actually get symbol. If I save this, let's come here to the console and I'm going to run node behavior.js, and you see it outputs symbol. So remember, the objects, they are all of type object. So let me just write this down here a little bit. The objects are all of type object except for functions, which are of type function, right? And this is basically the category of every non-primitive value in JavaScript except for functions. Now, symbols, on the other hand, they actually fall under the category of a symbol and they are considered a primitive value. Now, another interesting or another consequence of being a primitive value is that we can use symbols as key for objects. So if I were to, for example, my obj, and then here I can actually use the symbol like this, let's say string symbol, for example, and that's going to be my value. And then if I want to console log my object, and then here I need to access, sorry for the typo, console log my object, and here I need to access by the array notation, let's call it like this. Once I try to access the symbol, then I can also access its value. So a symbol can be used as a key in an object in JavaScript. I'll save this. Let's run this and this works fine. Now, if I were to, for example, try to use an object as a key here, then this is not going to work in JavaScript. So if I were to use an object, let's say key is 1 as my key, then you see that I am already getting a lot of lines here. So there are many problems like this, right? I cannot use an object as a key in another plain object in JavaScript. Now, that's it for, or at least these are the main things that make symbols a primitive value in JavaScript, but there is also quite some interesting behavior when it comes to comparison and to assignment. So let's stick to comparison here, and if I were to simply say numeric, it's hard to type today, not const, sorry, console.log, here, let me fix this, a numeric symbol is strictly equal to string symbol, and I save this, and you are saying, oh, come on, 1 is different than A, so of course they're not going to be equal. So, and then, yeah, okay, that's true, it's false. But what happens if I remove this one? Because remember, I said this is an optional parameter. What happens if I remove the description and I run it again and I get false again? So this is one example of this object-like behavior of symbols in a way that each symbol is truly unique behind the scenes in JavaScript. Now, when exactly you should use symbols? Well, that's a question it's hard for me to answer. It's also a bit hard for me to think about actual explicit use cases where we would use symbols. We would directly say, yeah, that this needs to be solved with a symbol, for example. It's hard for me to think about it. And of course, if you want to do some research online, you're free to do so. It's just important for us to know that symbols exist and that they ensure true uniqueness of a certain value while still remaining a primitive value in JavaScript. Okay, we actually discussed already the first and the second part. Now let's see what happens when we convert symbols to other primitive values. Back here, let's create a new file when we say converting.js. I will steal from my behavior file. I'm gonna copy and paste this, and let's see what happens if I simply try to convert my numeric symbol to a number, right? So number, numeric symbol. And here I'm just gonna pass 1 again and an A again here. I'm gonna save this, and back at the terminal, let's clear everything, node converting.js, and I have an error. So I cannot convert a symbol value to a number. Okay, yeah, sounds fair. So it's not possible to convert symbols to numbers, okay? Now, to strings, it's fine. If I were to call this string with numeric symbol, that's okay. It's going to output the whole symbol 1 here. And if I were to call this with string symbol, that's also fine. It's going to output symbol A. Now, calling the string construct or the string factory works, but if I were to try this type of conversion here, where I actually add my symbol to an empty string and I save this and I run, I get an error, right? So it doesn't work with every single or with every method of converting to strings. If I were to, let's say, string symbol dot to string and I save this and I run, then this also works. It's fine. But if I try the plus operator here, this is not going to work. Of course, converting to booleans, it's a no-brainer. This will work as long as the symbol is there. So if I save this and I run, this will always convert to true, right? Because the symbol, I think there is no case where the symbol has a falsy value. Symbol is always a truthy value by default, and that's also one of the characteristics that makes this an object-like value in JavaScript, right? So quote-unquote object-like value. If I were to pass the string symbol here, this will also evaluate to true. And if I were to pass a new symbol, this will also evaluate to true, even if I have no description here. That's it for the discussion about symbols. Quick discussion. I mean, the use cases, you can find some of them online if you want to do some research about it and see when exactly symbols are used. To be honest, I don't use them in the code, and I haven't found a use case where symbols, as I said, I haven't found a use case where symbols would be the default choice. Okay, but there are some more advanced applications, and you are free to actually do the research and read about it if you want to do so. That's it for today. Quick discussion about symbols. As I said, the use cases are not very common in standard projects, but it may be the case that you come across them, and it's important you are familiar and know that they exist. Awesome. In the next video, we'll move away from discussing these primitive types and we'll start discussing control flow structures. If you don't want to miss that, make sure to subscribe to the channel and you'll get a notification when the video is out. See you in the next video. Bye bye.